Well, I've been working all morning on more of our figure carving tools, and I've got all but one of them roughed out. They're all forged, they're all ready to grind, and I'm probably going to spend the afternoon or tomorrow doing some grinding. But I thought I would bring you along with the forging of the last tool, and that's going to be a curved chisel. Now this chisel is curved in this direction, and it's bent in this direction. And that allows you to get that down tight to the surface you're working on, but still have your fingers up off the bar or off the jaws of the vise, whatever you're around. And it allows you to even do a little bit of scooping. It's ideal for cutting things like horns, mustaches on the wizard heads, which is a good place you can go see this particular chisel in use, and all sorts of things of that nature that are hard to get into. They're hard for just a regular flat chisel to get into because this is down tight to the surface you're working on. So this is a very handy way to do a chisel for this. It doesn't have a lot of other purposes because it is kind of specialized, but because it bends in two directions, I thought we'd go ahead and make it a separate video. It's not really all that difficult, but all the other tools I've been doing are things that we've pretty much talked about before, and I'll talk about why they're unique once the set is complete and we're onto the Dragon project. I'm going to start with the same 9-inch piece of S7 round bar that we were using for the other tools. This is the last piece that I cut, and I'm going to start off by making it an octagon just because I like the octagon shape, and I'm going to do that under the power hammer again. If I didn't have the power hammer, I might start off with 5/8 round bar or just use the 3/4 inch round bar. But because I like the octagon shape and the power hammer makes it a one heat operation, I figure I might as well just go ahead and do that. So let's get this hot and go to the power hammer. So 2 heats under the power hammer gets this roughed out pretty nicely. Let's straighten this all out. That round end I'll straighten out with the grinder later. I just want things to be fairly symmetrical at this point. So that's our chisel shape. Now, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put it in a swedge and we'll shape the curved part of the chisel. So just a bottom swedge or a swedge block is all you really need for this. Well, a ball peen hammer that fits. And decide if that's enough of a curve for you. Now to curve the other way, you can put it in some other form, or you could try to work it this way, but it isn't bad. I'll turn this around so you can see what I'm doing. if you just lift this while you're working this side, then you can give it that dog leg effect. And that's really all we need to do to this. Everything else will be done pretty much at the grinder. I guess I'm going to put my touch mark on it first. Just a few steps to the tool overall. But the chisel end, that's pretty much all that has to happen to it. So I just go under the treadle hammer and put in my last name and the bear paw like I always do. Nothing new, you've all seen this before. Well, if you've been watching the videos, you've seen it before. And I'm going to mark it S7, so I know what kind of steel it is. I'm going to turn that around, and I'm just going to do a little bit of cleaning up on this end. I did some of that under the power hammer, I just need to make it a little neater. I just put a little bit of a taper in the struck end, and then round that off. So taper it square, taper it octagon, round up the taper. And I think that just makes a cleaner, neater tool. You could leave it octagon and just grind it if you want to. Sometimes this is just me fooling around. But I think that gets what we want. It's a nice curve, not too sharp a curve. This doesn't need to be real deep, just enough curve that it'll cut down both sides of a corner, which is typically where you're using a chisel like this. So now I'm going to bring it up to a nice glow, and then I'm going to put it in the vermiculite. I'm going to put it in there with the other tools I worked on today and let it cool just as slowly as I can. Now, frequently when I bury a tool in vermiculite, I think of that as annealing, even though technically for most steels they need to cool slower than what the vermiculite lets them cool. S7 to anneal is a very controlled process of cooling from high temperature to a lower temperature, and I'd have to look it up to get the exact numbers, but it's a 12-hour process. It takes overnight to do it. I'd have to set up my heat treat oven to really slowly cool it. And truly annealing it isn't completely necessary. My grinder is going to grind it just fine. If you're going to file these tools, the better of an annealing job you can do, the better off you are. Somebody out there is thinking, well, just normalize it. Well, you can't really normalize S7. It's an air hardening steel. When you normalize, you bring it up to temperature, pardon the bugs, you bring it up to temperature and you air cool it. Well, it's an air hardening steel. You do that with S7 or A2 or another air hardening steel, and you're hardening it. You're not normalizing it. So you can't really normalize these steels. By burying it in the vermiculite, I'm probably coming closer to normalizing than I really am annealing. But technically speaking, I'm not doing any of those things. It's just a blacksmith seat of the pants, do the best you can sort of approach. And S7 seems to be forgiving enough that I get away with that. I haven't had too much problem. The few pieces of S7 that I've had crack, I think was because they were hardened using the forge and they got too hot and they were allowed to cool, and then simply had a stress crack in them from being too hot for the initial hardening. I actually know one blacksmith that water quenches his S7. That makes me really nervous, and after seeing his success with it and me having some failures with it and having tools that broke in half, I've never had them shatter, but I've had them just break into a couple of pieces. I paid more attention to what he was doing, and what I found out was that he was never bringing it to critical temperature. He was heating it more to the temperature you would a W1 or an O1, which is in the 1450 to 1550 range, somewhere in there, instead of the 1725 or higher range that you might heat S7 to. So he's a full 200 degrees or more cooler, and I think that's why he gets away with it. I'm not recommending that. I'm not sure that it makes any better of a tool. If you can control the heat, get it to the right critical temperature, and air cool it, S7 makes outstanding tools. So I don't know if there's any reason to water quench them. But the fact that he gets away with that, and the fact that I have gotten away for years with making S7 tools and just heating them in the forge and air cooling them, and have had so few failures. I think S7's a forgiving steel. I think it's a good steel to work with. It is hard to forge. It is a tough steel. It's got to be hot. When it starts to get cool, it doesn't forge so well, so you need to heat it up again and just keep working it at a high temperature. Again, you can't normalize it. You can bury it in the vermiculite and it doesn't get real hard, and it's easier to file. You can file it, but it's never as easy as it is when it comes new. So if you need to do a lot of filing and you can do it before you ever do any forging, like we did with these scale chisels, that's the softest it's ever going to be, is the way it comes from the manufacturer in its annealed state. Now I'm going to go ahead and finish grinding all these tools. I've got 16 of these that haven't been ground. I've got 18 of them that need to be hardened and tempered, and I think I'm just going to do all that, not part of the video. And then we're going to show you how some of these tools work. We're going to do some test forgings with them. I don't know that I will do a dragon as a test project. I might do it for myself, but if I do that for the video, then fewer people might watch the wrought iron dragon when it comes time to do that. And I really want people to watch that. I want that to be the big finale from all of this build-up. And if people get tired of watching me make dragons that don't come out right because I'm doing test pieces, and then they don't watch that video, then I've sort of defeated the whole purpose of the project. So some of these we will show how they work. We'll do some features. We'll look at some eyeballs and see what the different eyeball punches look like. We'll look at different scale patterns using these scale chisels. We'll do some experimenting with the fullers and see what they do, and maybe just do some features, maybe do some other kind of whimsical faces and creatures or something just for the fun of it, and see what we come up with. But then we'll get on to that dragon. I got to prep the stock. It needs to be forged into different dimensions because the 1 by 2 inch is not what I want to make a dragon out of. It needs to be drawn out, and part of it needs to be drawn into something for a back plate for the door knocker. So there's a fair amount of work to do before that stock is even ready to turn into a dragon, and we'll probably show that, even though it's going to be nothing but drawing out. It'll be mostly done under a power hammer. I have a power hammer in the shop, so for things like this, it doesn't bother me to use it. I know a lot of you don't have power hammers. You can do all of this by hand at the anvil. It just takes longer. But today you saw how I might really work. Quite a quick process to form a tool. This is not the tool we did today, but to take that round bar, make it an octagon, forge the initial taper for the chisel, and then clean it up at the anvil isn't a big process with a power hammer. It is a lot more work by hand, but it can be done, and the younger you are and the more energetic you are, the easier it is. I'm getting to the point that if I don't have to swing a hand hammer, I'd really rather not, so I kind of like having the power hammer. Anyways, I've talked long enough as always. Time to go on and do something else. I think I got to run to town and buy some cement so I can mix some concrete tomorrow before it gets too hot and get a project around the house taken care of. But then we'll be back in the shop. In the meantime, I hope you enjoyed the video. Give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already hit that subscribe button, hit that subscribe button down below. Watch a few more of the videos, but then get out to the shop, make some tools, work on some sort of a project, have fun, but stay safe and wear your safety glasses. And we'll see you for the next one.